You want high-performing teams. Well, who doesn't? I know I do. And I think we all can learn a thing or two from Scott McFall.
Absolutely.
He's really a leading voice when it comes to team dynamics, wouldn't you say?
I'd agree with that, yeah.
He had some seriously powerful concepts just from this recent training call that I was on with him. And I thought we could kind of unpack some of these key takeaways today.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's start with this whole idea of collaborative energy.
Okay.
McFall argues that it's kind of this crucial ingredient, especially when you're talking about teams, particularly with men.
Yeah.
And it's about shifting that mindset away from viewing your colleagues as competition.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because you're all on the same team, striving for a common goal.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting he brings that up, that competitive energy, because I think a lot of the time, it's almost by default, we kind of fall into those roles a little bit, right? We're kind of sizing each other up, who's, maybe more dominant in this area. But when you really shift your mindset to thinking, we're all in this together, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about us. That's where I think that collaborative energy can really make a difference.
It's not a boxing ring, right?
Yeah.
We're not trying to knock each other out.
Exactly, yeah. You think about like a pit crew in a Formula One race.
Look, I love that.
Everyone's got to do their part to get that car over the finish line first.
Yeah.
And if one person's trying to outshine the other, well, you're probably going to wind up losing the whole race.
And it makes so much sense. And I think, when you're laser focused on collaboration, you're more likely to tap into each other's strengths, support each other's growth.
Oh, for sure. And that actually ties into another one of McFall's big points, which is all about getting a clear, unbiased read on your team.
Okay.
And what he means by that is really understanding people's motivations and not just projecting your own assumptions onto them.
I see what you mean.
Because we've all been there, right? Where we assume, oh, everyone's motivated by the same things I am. But the reality is maybe you're someone who thrives under pressure, but someone else needs a clear runway to do their best work.
Yeah, like I might love public recognition, but you find it super awkward.
Exactly. Different strokes for different folks. And that's where those clarifying questions come in, like really taking the time to understand their perspective, their strengths, their weaknesses.
Right.
And then you can use that knowledge to create a truly collaborative and supportive environment.
That makes sense. So you're not just assuming everybody's on the same page.
Exactly. It's about getting everyone on the same page by actually understanding where they're coming from.
And it kind of reminds me, like, you show up to a potluck, right? And you got this dish that you made.
Okay. Yeah.
Looks amazing. You're really proud of it, but it's got ingredients that nobody's ever even heard of. They're going to be a little hesitant to dig in.
Right. It's like, what is this?
Yeah. So how do you get them to kind of, trust that it's going to be delicious?
Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of what McFall was talking about with, building credibility. Right?
Yes, exactly. And he really emphasizes that it's not enough to just have good ideas.
Right.
You need to back them up with something solid.
Right.
Think data, case studies, real-world examples.
I was just going to say that.
Those stories that make people go, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Not just like, trust me, this marketing campaign is going to be huge.
Right.
But here's why. Here's the data. Here's how it worked in a similar situation.
You got the receipts, right? You got the receipts.
Exactly. You got to have the receipts. And what's really interesting is he draws this parallel between building that credibility and reframing challenges. So he suggests that we often perceive obstacles as way more daunting than they actually are. Like we blow things out of proportion in our minds.
Sure, we get in our own way.
Totally. It's like that saying, the mountain always looks bigger from the bottom.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Right. And, we psych ourselves out before we even start climbing.
Yeah.
So McFall's advice is to break it down. Instead of looking at the sheer size of the mountain, just focus on taking those first few steps.
Right. One foot in front of the other.
Exactly. And suddenly it doesn't seem quite so intimidating.
Right. Like you can totally do this.
Yeah.
It's not insurmountable, and I think you can apply that same logic, whether you're pitching a new product, navigating a tricky negotiation, whatever it is. It's funny, isn't it? We talk about leadership and we often focus so much on the external stuff.
Right.
But McFall brings it back to something so fundamental, and that's self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And he talks about this concept of like objectively modeling self-success. And I know you might be thinking, here we go, tooting your own horn.
Right.
But it's not about that at all. It's about taking a step back and really understanding why you've been successful. Like what are the specific traits, the decision-making processes, maybe even just like the habits
Right.
that have helped you achieve those wins.
That's like you're reverse engineering your own success.
Exactly.
Not to brag about it,
Yeah.
but to decode it so you can replicate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And share that knowledge.
Precisely. And the how is just as important as the what here. He really emphasizes like teaching those success factors through real world examples, stories that people can relate to, their own experiences.
Right.
It's about translating those insights into, okay, so what can I do differently?
Actionable steps.
Exactly.
Well, and speaking of actionable steps, we got to talk about feedback. Because, I mean, McFall's approach here is really interesting. He's a big proponent of the whole positive intent model. And I even wrote down this example because I thought it was so good. He said, praise the initiative, then suggest improvements.
Ooh, I like that.
Isn't that good? It's so simple, but
it's huge.
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's only changes, like the whole feeling of, getting constructive criticism.
Well, because you're framing it in a way that's not demoralizing.
Right.
You're first acknowledging the effort, the good intentions behind someone's actions. So it establishes this foundation of like trust and respect before you even get into, okay, but here's how we can make it even better. And I think that ties in really well with his advice for high-level feedback, especially when you're talking about like senior management.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So for the folks who are kind of at the top of their game already, what's the secret sauce there?
He suggests that feedback at that level should be less about, those tactical details and more about strategic impact. It's about connecting that individual's performance to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The company's vision, the long-term goals, even just like the values.
Right.
So it's not just about doing things right, it's about doing the right things. And that kind of feedback really fosters that sense of ownership.
Right. It's like, you're driving the bus here.
Exactly.
Where are we going with this?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I feel like we just got a masterclass in building high-performing teams, from fostering collaboration, understanding those individual motivations, giving feedback that actually empowers people.
Absolutely. And don't forget that crucial element of self-awareness, right? That objectively modeling self-success.
It is powerful.
Yeah.
So as you go about your week, think about that. How can you apply that in your own work and interactions? What are the unique strengths, the strategies that you bring to the table? How can you use those to elevate not only your own performance, but the performance of your entire team? Until next time, happy collaborating, everybody.